Welcome to the Real Life Buyer podcast. In this podcast, you will hear interviews with business owners, entrepreneurs, thought leaders, authors, and technical specialists in their field. These professionals will hasten your development, accelerate your career, and broaden your business know-how. Now, introducing your host, Dave Barr, interviewing with a purchasing twist.
Hello, and welcome to the Real Life Buyer. Today's guest is Steven Weigler, also known as the Empathetic Attorney, the founder and executive counsel of a leading US law firm, EmergeCounsel, that offers sophisticated business and intellectual property counsel to entrepreneurs worldwide. Steven has developed a deep expertise in the evolving field of e-commerce law, guiding hundreds of online businesses from their initial concept through to successful sales. With decades of legal experience, Steven also brings a unique perspective, having founded and led an education technology startup as CEO and General Counsel for 7 years. Additionally, Steven served as a senior attorney for a Fortune 50 communications company. In this podcast, I wish to explore how to help SME business owners protect their brand and intellectual property assets. So, without further ado, I welcome Steven onto the podcast. Hi, Steven.
Good to see you, David. How's things going?
Very well, thank you. Not too bad at all. So, good. I always like to dive into a little bit of the background of some of my guests, and I'm intrigued to discover what kind of factors have sustained your passion for law for over 30 years. And if you had taken a different career path, what would you have chosen to do instead?
That's a super interesting question. I mean, my career path was never particularly linear. I knew probably from 10th grade on that I wanted to go to law school. And it really was an interest in justice and an interest in I was a political science major, and I actually worked on Capitol Hill back when it was a little saner in Washington, D.C. for the House of Representatives. And so I always had an interest in government and politics and justice, and especially criminal justice. And so my short-term goal at that time, which I really had no long-term goal because I was young and really didn't think about it too much, was I wanted to be a prosecutor in a major city. And so I started in New York, and then I ended up at the Miami District Attorney's Office, or it's called the State Attorney's Office. And so Miami had a lot of action. And I learned quickly that really, as much as I was passionate about it and it was interesting, that really wasn't something I wanted to do, period. So I tried a lot of cases. I became very attuned to different racial and socioeconomic groups. And so it was like enlightening, having grown up in the suburbs of Milwaukee. But I knew I didn't want to do that forever. And so I had to really soul search after a lot of people go into career and say, hey, this is what I'm going to do. And I really had to soul search, and ended up, after doing some civil work, because I had to bridge the gap a little bit, but I ended up in technology law for AT&T, which is a huge telecommunications conglomerate. Well, when I went into AT&T, I thought that was a job for life. And then the next thing you know, AT&T got bought. So wow. and telecom melted. And so it just isn't, my field really basically went away. And so I had to sit down and think about, well, what are the things that I learned out of that? And also at the time, AT&T gave me, as part of the exit package, a substantial sum to say if I wanted to do a startup. And so I never had the opportunity where someone was actually handing me money to do a startup. And I really wanted to think big, and started a predictive analytics company focused on school districts in the United States, whether students, early warning factors on students dropping out. We take the data from the school districts, and we had our own data and our own assessments, and we crunch them and provide a report, and even a report to the students on the factors such as, well, a lot of objective factors, but a lot of subjective factors too. Like, are they feeling bored? Are they feeling like, are their parents in the way of success? Are the teachers in the way of success? And so we built this whole predictive analytic, and it did. So I had to raise a lot of money for that, and it did very well. Sure, there were trials and tribulations, but it grew. Like not hockey stick, but for business to government, it grew. And I had to raise even more money to build a sales force and do all these things. But anyway, I was busy building a company, and I ended up diluting myself out of the enterprise. I wouldn't call it an enterprise, out of the small business after a number of years. And before that, we were going to sell to a major educational conglomerate, and something happened that had nothing to do with the success of sale, just life. Over on the other side, there was a cab driver decided to commit suicide one day and drove the person who was going to commence a sale into a traffic circle in Boston and flipped the cab, and the guy never came back. So anyway, the point is like I learned a lot about like life and that things happen, and running a company, it was enlightening to say the least. And so that leads me to EmergeCounsel, because at the time, I was, I don't know, maybe 50 or younger, 48. And I wasn't in the financial condition nor the mental condition to just stop and, play golf, because I don't even play golf. And so I really put down all of my skills on a piece of paper. And that led me to, wow, I really have a unique ability to counsel businesses and advocate for businesses, because again, I have a litigation background too, towards success. And so that's really the start of EmergeCounsel. And we've been around for 9 years, and we take in a way, it's a very different approach to our clients in law, but in a way it's, law is law, and there's facts, there's law. It's very logical. I know a lot about a lot of different kinds of transactions. I know what's going to happen if you don't do it right. And so that's my passion. And I've really enjoyed the journey. Not every day.
Of course.
But it's been fun. And a lot of my even in Scholar Centric, which was my last business, a lot of my clients, the clients were international. So I really know a lot about international work and the nuances, and spend a lot of time building relationships around the globe.
Right. Well, thanks very much for sharing that journey. Some of it obviously quite difficult, some of it perhaps more inspiring and positive.
Yes.
But yeah, as you say, everybody's journey is different. And I'm glad that you're with me today to share yours.
Well, thank you.
So let's dive into some of the subject matter today. Mm-hmm. Can you kind of help us understand what steps businesses can take to protect their copyright protected content from being, again, copied by others and distributed by others, particularly on the big search engines and social media platforms? How do we stop that? Is there any way of stopping it?
The answer is yes, absolutely. And it can be difficult. And so everything has to have a strategy in business, I think. If you go rudderless in any aspect of your business, and sometimes, honestly, I feel like I'm right there with everyone else. It's like, whoa, I didn't really think about that. I don't have a plan, a strategy. And when it comes to a legal strategy, I find the message I want to give out is a lot of people, I get it. It's the last call you want to make. You think that every moment's on the clock. It's not particularly either interesting, or it can be daunting. And it's not in most people's subject matter expertise. So they don't want to speak to an attorney, or they don't look forward to it. Trust me, when I had my business, and again, I am an attorney, I had to consult with tax, business, it's like, you'd wake up, you'd look at the calendar. The point is, with the legal strategy, a lot of people can procrastinate on that, but you need a strategy. You need to start by taking a look at what are your intellectual property assets. So there's different, there's trademark, which it protects brand, which I am a huge advocate of protecting. Copyright protects the things that go around brand, like the artwork, the physical copy of the marketing copy and everything. That's copyright. And in the United States, it's different than a lot of other countries. You have to register that copyright to get into court. You own the copyright, but to enforce it, you need a registered copyright. So that's one. And then patent is a lot more complicated, and strategically you need a strategist. And the fourth is trade secret. So you have to, and trade secret is what you build internally and with your vendors contractually to protect the property, the intellectual property, from getting out. So the point is you have to take your whole interface with your clients and third parties, and you have to map out what's a secret kernels of that strategy or of that content. that you want to protect. Because for example, I have a company that's a greeting card company. Well, they make thousands of greeting cards a year. That would be even like Hallmark and the big companies I don't think they file, from my research, I could be wrong, that they file registration for thousands of copyrights. It's just not practical. So you have to sit down and figure out, well, what's the secret elements? Is it the color scheme? Is it the fact that they use a certain kind of paper in the internal greeting card? Is that, through a vendor and they get it at pennies to the dollar? What is the secret sauce of the intellectual property? And it's always going to be, the first one is always going to be brand. And so you have to sit down and you have to have a deliberate strategy to protect the maximum amount of your brand at the minimum amount of price. And so what we've done is I've actually almost productized it. It's called Total TM. And what it is it is a thorough process to see if your brand is ever going to infringe on, or is at the time infringing on, any other brands by doing an algorithmic search and then filing trademark at the United States Patent and Trademark Office of British. It doesn't matter. It could be a combination of the British IP Office. It could be the Canadian IP Office. But we're looking at a strategy. How are we going to get that done at the minimum amount of price? And so the point is if you do that and then look at some copyright, like what is your sales collateral? A lot of times it can be copywriting the design of your webpage. So everyone has a unique design. Like I'm looking at yours. That's a design that could be the background, the high rises, the red and gray. All that is in one fell swoop can be protected in copyright. And so we execute on that strategy. Now, if you don't, that takes, it could take a week. Like it's not a huge exercise and it's not several thousands of dollars. And so you do that. And then at the time you start seeing infringement, sometimes it's too late. Many times, if you didn't go through the protection exercise, you're kind of out of luck. But when you start seeing the infringement, then it depends where it is. If it's like a pirated website, if you have the copyright, you can go to what's called ICANN, which is the international collaboration of and protocol for web, and initiate a takedown or an arbitration, which the other side will never go through. If it has to do with something that you see on a third-party website, like if you're an Amazon seller, then you can work through Amazon. But that's an art in of itself. If you have direct infringement, like that you're seeing it, you can do what's called a takedown service. And we have relationships with takedown services, because what I think a lot of people don't realize is when you start seeing it, it's usually not someone sitting in their basement. It's a deliberate effort, many times coming from overseas, and you have to handle it through multiple prongs. And so, again, it sounds daunting. A lot of times it's not as bad as it seems if you work with counsel, because again, it's like it's almost like going hunting or fishing. You don't fish with one lure. You have a number of lures that you have in your tackle box. I'm not much of a fisherman, but you have a set of tools that you use, and you have to know when to apply what when. But there's a saying, 1 ounce of prevention is greater than a pound of cure, and so that's really how it works. And if you have the protection, number one, you're not the low-hanging fruit for infringement, because you're going to show that you have that protection either through a C or an R, and even a skilled infringer is going to, if you put a C, that alone isn't going to do it, because they can go to the Copyright Office in 2 seconds and see if that's really copyrighted. And so, they're going to go for the low-hanging fruit usually. And so again, they're not going to go for a company that has well-protected goods or services. And okay. So that's really, I know it's a long answer, but protection, it involves strategy, and it involves using the tools properly without spending a ton of money.
Right. So can I just clarify, for a small business owner, this sounds quite a complicated area, but it sounds like using the right person or company, the actual process to copyright is relatively straightforward, and it's not too expensive either. And therefore, it's well worth investing a small amount of money and time in. Would you agree?
100%. The challenge is really, again, copyright. The office in the United States has a lot of, they call them circulars, but they're rules. And so you have to know how to file to get the maximum amount of protection for the minimum amount of price without getting rejected. And the challenge at the Copyright Office is there's millions of things that are in their registry, but you can't search it or anything. Or it would be, a client has never asked me to search just because it would be thousands and thousands of dollars. So, you're kind of taking a chance that this is original, and but it is very inexpensive to file the application. The question is, what application are you going to file?
So for those people, when you think of search engines and social media, they are vast in their own right. How on earth could you determine whether your copyright is being infringed? How do you find areas where people are using your stuff? What's the best way of trying to identify if people are taking your brand for a kind of ride and trying to use it? It just seems that you've got a massive sea out there, all this information and data. But how do you know, or how can you find out whether your copyright is being infringed relatively easily?
Yeah. Well, first, you're going to see it. Sometimes you see it in your sales numbers. Sometimes so if we go in the world of e-commerce, you're going to see it. A lot of people have back-end software that are going to see, hey, my numbers went down, or wow, someone's using my back-end keywords, or all of a sudden I have a unique kind of planted back-end keyword that someone's using, and you're going to see their site. But usually it's the numbers go down, or they're monitoring the good or service. In more for the general business owner, or even the services business, you're going to start, a tip-off sometimes is you get customer confusion. Like they call and they're like, why aren't you located in Texas? And you're like, no. And then they read off, well, it says, EmergeCounsel in Texas. We have oil, and our oil clients are in Texas. Something that would be like, well, that's not me, but it sounds like, my advertising lingo. And then you go back and see. So it's something usually comes up that is of impact on the business. I know some of my marketing content or blogs I've written have been infringed. I've seen that. And, but then some of it's like, well, maybe it just was information. Maybe that should be in the public domain anyway. So, that's another analysis you have to make. What impact is it going to have to the company? And that's when you're making your copyright analysis, you're really saying, all right, well, what's a really big deal? If it is e-commerce, or it is something where you're selling in mass over broad swaths of the world, there are services, again, that will run a algorithmic search to see the breadth of the infringement. And usually it's extremely much larger when you're seeing it than you think it is. So you don't want to play that game of whack-a-mole, because that's a loser's game. And so you have to have a strategy that kind of takes it all out at one time. And that I can go into it, but it gets really complicated, both in the United States and Britain and anywhere. It's there's strategies to take them all down at one time. And it can be quite lucrative, obviously, but it's a novel. Like, judges don't even really understand what you're trying to do here. So that can take up a lot of time.
Right. Now, there's lots of emerging technology, obviously AI being one of them. Now, are there, or is there developing that you've seen an AI technology that you can use to do the searching for you? Can you put in, obviously, your imagery, your information in such a way that AI can go out to the World Wide Web and check out whether anything is being duplicated in any other area or sphere? Is that something that's coming to the fore in your industry?
100%. But there's the thing I'm noticing with AI is it's, bad in, bad out. And so it's only going on the data that's been uploaded to AI. And so sometimes if I do, just my own organic AI search, which now, on a newer computer, you just push that new kind of button that looks like, at least on Microsoft. and it, you type it in and it spits out a report, Copilot, but then check the sites and you see, wow, that came from some piece of advertising from, Indonesia, it's just like, kind of like, wow, it's bad in. And so that's one issue. But I think you want to work with a technology vendor. And if anyone wants to, do it themselves, feel free to contact me and I'll give you the name of some of my vendors. But they're incorporating AI for sure. But they were incorporating AI before we even knew about AI. So it's sophisticated, it's good. But if they're not using AI, wow, that would be their product would be very good. So again, I think you have to know your vendor, and if you want to, go through and check out the sites and make sure that what's spitting out is right. Yes, AI would be good for everyone. But in this, you need, it's kind of like if you're going back to the fishing, if you're gonna fillet a fish, you can use your kitchen knife. Like you can do that, and you probably would have a filleted fish. Or you can use, some special knife that you find at a fishing store that, just really can get that nailed. And so it's really up to the consumer on what kind of tools they really want to use.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of all the information you mentioned, blogs earlier on, that we all put out there. And obviously, with today's AI technology, that information is being assessed and gathered and analyzed and everything else. Is there any way that, or do you know if AI in any way determines whether certain information that you put out is already copyright protected and therefore doesn't reuse it again when people put in questions and so forth? Is the technology at a point where it says, oh, this information is copyright protected, I mustn't repeat it to anybody who is searching for, the answer to a particular question? Do you think that's being done, or is it indiscriminate at the moment? AI just searches everything and uses it as it wants to?
No, there are, newspapers, for example, they don't want to get sued for copyright infringement. So they're going to run everything through AI to make sure that these days, nothing is directly quoted, or if it is, the quote is attributed. So yes, the technology exists. I think it's relatively inexpensive, if not free. But let's keep in mind, copyright only protects works of art that are that can be memorialized in a fixed media. And so if I conceptualize the same idea, that's not going to be protected by copyright. If I literally copy what you said, like it's a literal copy, and that's what happened on my blog. It's like maybe 20 words, in my case more, and no attribution that Steve Weigler said this. It's just word for word, that's a copyright infringement. And so that's why it's a good tool, but it's not the tool many of the times. You have to integrate it with other tools to have some viable protection. Because I can take a complicated concept that you might have expressed, not attribute it to you, just rewrite it. And unfortunately, there's AI to do that too.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I'm thinking obviously business owners who are engaging with both suppliers and customers, and obviously quite often they are signing agreements. And usually those agreements have in place different clauses on intellectual property and copyright and so forth. Can you give any particular advice to those business owners that perhaps don't have the kind of financial resources to engage with highly experienced and professional attorneys like yourself? Can you give us some indications of the things that they should make sure they're either not signing up to, or they include in the agreements they pass on for other people to sign? Is there any assistance you can give, any guidance you can give that will help them to have an effective copyright and IP protection in their own agreements?
Sure. So there's something that we can all, and again, I think it's I can either put it on my website or contact me, or you can find it on, any just Google it. It's something called a work for hire agreement. And so I always encourage my clients, and when I meet with them for the first time, which I really don't charge for, because I want to get to know them and their business, we really map out what's your flow. Like, where do the goods, if it's a goods company, where are the goods coming from? What are they? And then where are you? Who do you work with to get your customized goods or services? And then, like, is it independent contractors, which in the US is the concept that they're not employed, but you have a contract with them? Or are they employees? Or are they third-party vendors, that aren't either? So you map that out. And then where is the product? Who's your audience? Like, where's the product going out? So that's something that any entrepreneurial organization can do, is start by mapping out what are the pain points, what are the possible places that this can breach. And so that's number one. Then by looking at that, you can see your strengths and weaknesses and what you need in your agreements. But if you have for example, and we just had this, is at the M&A table, we're like in the middle of trying to sell a company, and we can't find a work for hire provision in for the artwork and the logo. So someone created the logo. If in copyright, you own that logo if you create it. But if you create it under an employment, or you sign what's called a work for hire agreement, you then can transfer the ownership to the company or whoever needs that artwork. If you don't have that agreement, it's very difficult to claim ownership. And that's, your logo, I think, is, besides the name of your company, is really important. And so a work for hire agreement is something that an attorney need not be involved in remotely, but you need to have a first, again, you wouldn't know who to have a work for hire agreement with if you didn't trace out the journey. And so, you look and it's like, wow, I have that logo. So who owns it? And really, that kind of exercise can be very, very enlightening. The same holds true with any creation. Like if you're working on, for example, processes and systems for the business. Well, that, again, when you file at the Copyright Office in the United States, the registry is not, what you filed is not, it's not available to the public. So why not take a look at, wow, those are unique processes and systems. Maybe I should protect those in some way. I'm not saying it needs to be copyrighted necessarily, but maybe I have everyone put in my handbook, in my employment handbook, that's trade secret. So there's so many prophylactics that you can do in your business without the need for help, but you have to spend some time on it. And again, that gets back to, is do you have the time? Or could you be doing so? But that's, I think, those two things in both copyright protection and making sure that, you have a work for hire agreement, and the trade secret, like we all have employees that come and go. And so what do you want to make sure that no one takes? What is the secret sauce to your business? And protect those through making a big deal about it. It's no different than the Coca-Cola formula. Coca-Cola has never patented their, formula for their Coke, but, they can sell it worldwide because they created a process where I think no one knows what the other's doing. Like somebody orders I think there's probably cinnamon in it or something. Someone's a cinnamon vendor and they know exactly how much cinnamon to order, and no one knows that's even going into so creating processes like that are going to pay off very well, because that's like a crisis call that I get when someone left and stole the leads or something. It's like, but you never planned for it. So just, again, deliberation, planning, working with your team, and then some of it is sensing danger. I don't know how to teach people that, but including my own staff sometimes. So, sixth sense, but trust your gut.
Okay. Now, one of the things I'm quite interested in is I've tend to do business not only locally, but internationally. And you feel quite well protected when you're dealing with businesses that are using, let's say, Western type legal systems. But when you go further afield, let's say, it gets a bit more Wild West. And how effective is the legal protections you put in place when it goes to, shall we say, remote countries that aren't using what we would class as Western style laws, the effective things we feel very comfortable about. When it goes further afield, perhaps into the Far East or the Africas, etc., how effective are those same protections in those countries for you?
That's a really interesting question. To start out, all countries except some in South America and some that are we consider countries in crisis, there's no government, or it's not an effective government. we're connected through international protocols and treaties, both in patent, trademark, sometimes in contract, but it's very treaty based, and also copyright. So the key is, and a lot of these legal systems are much better and more effective than you think. And so we all kind of, if you're involved in this area of law, you all kind of speak the same language, and which is a rewarding part of the practice, because I travel all over the world to build these relationships with effective counsel in each of these jurisdictions. So it doesn't really matter to me if it's Vietnam, China, any of these places, because again, we have a treaty, and I have vetted connections that I've probably spent 10 years building. And so, and we're friends, and we trust each other. Now, with that being said, no country, there's a lot of, geopolitical issues and also local nuances in each one of these jurisdictions. And you learn it in international business, like if you took a class, or you go to the Alliance Française, it's different. And so like sometimes you're baffled, like, wow, what just happened? Like, that one happened in the States or Britain, or Canada, it just wouldn't go that way. And like, you're like, wow, I'm going to roll with this. But the point is so you need to, again, when you're tracing out your supply chain and tracing out your customer journey, you have to really take the law of that particular jurisdiction seriously. So it's China, which again, in the US at least, a lot of the goods that we consume, and now it might be changing, although I can't see how that would happen, but that's not my area of expertise. But the point is we consume a ton of goods from China. And so and if the goods are coming from China and that's where they're branded, like meaning the brand's being put on or the unique look and feel, well, we're going to get protection in China. We have Chinese counsel. She spends half her time in San Francisco. She speaks English. Our initial consult with her is even free. And the prices are extremely low to get trademark protection or copyright protection in China. I think, you would look at it like $1,000 or maybe 800 pounds every time. But that's not very expensive because we have the strategy mapped out. And then if we see infringement, we have protection in China. We've looked at the customer journey and done it. Chinese law it's administrative, meaning there's not a huge amount of discretion given to each judge or anything. And it's highly effective in Chinese law, and it's quick, but it's not. It's only about China. It's not. If you sent over an American judgment, which I'm about to do, I don't think it's going to go anywhere. Like so the point is you really have to look at the local nuances and have somebody that knows experienced counsel in those places to get you, number one, a good price, and number two, no exposure. We're taking action in a couple of cases in China, and it's cheaper than it is in the United States, and I would argue sometimes more effective. And, but then you go look at India, and India's, again, a big exporter. It's part of these treaties. The law makes more sense because it comes from the British common law. At least it makes more sense to me, but it's backed up for years. So you need a little bit of a different strategy or to have different expectations on how you're going to handle it in a country like India. And so, you just kind of go, again, it all goes back to the mapping and really taking into consideration that most of us are going to procure goods and services from overseas. And you really have to look at what the laws are there, understand that, well, most of our laws are exactly the same, but you go into the French system, it's a different kind of law. Again, I'm not sure I understand it sometimes, but the language we speak when it comes to intellectual property protection is the same. And I have really good counsel in France. Again, the customs are a little different, but it's just everything. That's what's fascinating about it. I love that part of it. It's all different and the same. And everyone speaks English in my group. Call me and I will find you. It could be French Congo, and I'll find you an English-speaking excellent attorney that will explain the process in that place.
Great. That's really reassuring.
Belgian Congo.
No
So
worries.
anyway.
Before I ask you my last question, Can you share with the audience today where they can find out more about your company, where your social media hangouts are? Can you share those for us today?
Sure. So number one, I'm really big on LinkedIn. And again, the Empathetic Attorney is a LinkedIn newsletter. Please subscribe. That's a New Year's resolution because I have a lot of connections on LinkedIn and followers, but I don't have a lot of, I really want to increase my, the word that I'm trying to put out, which is attorneys do have, we're very social emotional based, and think holistically for client success. So anyway, I'm really big on LinkedIn, but I offer initial consultations where I want to get to know you and your business at no cost. And you can find me at www.emergecounsel.com, EmergeCounsel.com. And if you want to just call and, talk about your business and what's going on with it and some things you foresee in the future, a lot of times it ends there, at least I hope for the short term, because I'd love to build a business relationship with you. One thing that's a bummer sometimes is when you just have a transaction, you're like, do a trademark and you really like the business and you really like the business owner, but they wanted a trademark, you did a trademark, and you really don't build that kind of customer journey. It's not that I don't mind the revenue, but it's my goal is to try and build this kind of one-off relationship, because you don't need to talk to an attorney all the time. In fact, the idea is rarely, but have a plan so when we get to the point of M&A or that you have an exitable company, I don't care if you want to sell it or you don't, but it should be clean and exitable, that I'm there on your journey. And so anyway, and there's a lot of resources, again, on the Emerge Counsel website, and you can see all the blogs and everything that I have.
Brilliant. Thanks for sharing that. So my last question is, what can you tell us about the latest innovations in international IP and copyright law, and how do you foresee the law changing in the next 5 to 10 years?
That's an outstanding question. I just went to an international IP conference in London, and it's a really strange time to ask that question, because at least the view of the incoming American president is that nothing's going to stay the same. And so we went through it with a noted economist. In fact, she was like granddaughters of Keynes, and she actually lives in Britain. I was like, wow, I didn't even know he even had any offspring. But anyway, like the famous economist. So anyway, nothing's very predictable right now, and that could bring benefit, although I'm not the person to ask on how. Or it could bring huge disruptions into processes and procedures and protocols that these countries have. And so a lot of it is, even in the worst of times, it seems like countries, when it comes to protection on intellectual property, despite what you read, act in good faith to try and, at least the attorneys involved, to try and protect the intellectual property of its citizens and others, because commerce is everything. I think we all realize that. No commerce, no economy. And so it's going to be interesting to see, because so many of the things that we thought were entrenched in the however old the United States is not, according to this new incoming president, might not be entrenched. And so it's a difficult question to answer right now. I think we're going to be having a lot more seminars and a lot more need to meet internationally and figure this out. But I think right now, post-COVID, the USPTO, which is a trademark office in and the patent office, is fully staffed, and the wait times have gotten back to normal. We'll see. It's a difficult question to answer, though, because again, it's like I could have answered it like 6 months ago.
Fabulous. Well, Steven, our time's come to an end. It's been fantastic talking to you today. Thanks you very much for joining the podcast, and I hope everything goes well for you and you have a wonderful holiday break.
You too. A pleasure.
Thanks, Steve. So there's another Real Life Buyer podcast. I do hope you enjoyed it, and it has given you some ideas and inspiration for greater action and achievement. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on future episodes, and a 5-star review would be most appreciated. If you would like to discover more about me and what I do, take a look at www.thereallifebuyer.co.uk. Bye.